Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is Friday at about 10:26. Hope everyone's doing good. It's a pretty overcast, pretty dark day today. Looks like we're gonna get some rain, but anyway, hope everyone's doing good. It's Friday, TGIF. So yeah, gonna probably go to Bull Moose tomorrow to get some more movies. We'll see what happens. I uh, I I'm excited. I've been watching a ton of movies that I've never seen before. Movies that I heard about, movies that I heard about in passing. Some films that I got recently that I did some shows on is The Driller Killer, which is a just an amazing film by Abel Ferrara, who is just a kind of an insane director. He's probably most well known for the infamous Bad Lieutenant starring Harvey Keitel. I don't know if I've done a show on Bad Lieutenant. I really should. There's actually a remake of that film that's actually really good. That was directed by Werner Herzog. It's actually really good with Nicolas Cage. Totally gonzo crazy. But so I did. And I also did a show on Sugar Cookies, which is a movie by Lloyd Kaufman from the Trauma Film Company, which was a totally amazing film and such a big surprise. So a lot of the shows lately have been on movies I've never seen before. I've heard about, heard about them through. A lot of the times, there's a couple of YouTube guys that I watch. 42nd Street Forever, who is a British YouTube guy who is just amazing. He's a walking encyclopedia when it comes to all things exploitation and horror movies and just trash culture. He's just awesome, and I learn and hear about a lot of films from him, and then especially Mood 616, who is a Canadian YouTube guy, who's probably my favorite. It's hard to say; both of them are so good. I think 42nd Street Forever takes a little bit of a deeper dive. But it's tight. It's tight. It's a tight race. But Mood 616 is great. I've learned a lot about film through him, and I've gotten turned on to a whole series of different directors. And so I come across a lot of these movies through these channels. There's a few other guys out there that do some really good work, when it comes to horror and exploitation. Those guys are my favorite. I always go back to them. And then I watch a lot of YouTube people who kind of focus on more, modern or contemporary horror films, which as of late I've been kind of disappointed with. So, but I still, even though that's been happening, I still try to stay pretty current with new things that are coming out. So today's show is on a movie that I bought, I'd never seen before. I'm a really big fan. This film is part of the whole kind of explosion in Canada that happened in the late 70s and also the very, very late 70s and also in the 80s, early 80s to mid 80s. There is this kind of like Renaissance period in Canada in the world of horror exploitation. There's so many great films that came out during that time. Of course, you had David Cronenberg, got his start. One of the most infamous directors out there. Proud Canadian. He made Shivers, which was his debut. Amazing film. I did a show on that years ago. My Bloody Valentine, of course, one of the greatest slashers ever made. Another film that I think is just astoundingly good, another Canadian exploitation movie, is The Siege. So many great films were coming out, and this film that I'm going to be talking about today is another amazing slasher film that came out during that period, and that is Curtains. I've seen this movie twice, and I watched it recently after buying this on Blu-ray, and I have to say this has skyrocketed to the top of my list as far as one of the best slasher movies ever made. slasher, in the world of exploitation, you have, when you say you love, when you say you collect or buy or are just in love with all things exploitation, that or grindhouse cinema, that that can mean a lot of things. It's kind of like saying, well, I like jazz, or I like electronic music. And of course, when you take a dive, at first you have your respected groups or names in the area, or in this case, film. Dario Gento. People that are kind of known a little bit more on the surface for making these kinds of films. John Carpenter, or the Friday 13th films, Toby Hooper. I think those are like surface names on in the world of exploitation, and the most probably well known names in this beloved genre. But the more you dive into it, there's so many different things. There's so many subgenres. You have all of the giallo films, all the classic giallo films that have come out. Of course, the slasher genre. You have all of the awesome kind of sleazy sex exploitation films. You have, of course, another amazing subgenre, if you will, black exploitation. You have crime exploitation films. It just goes on and on. And science fiction exploitation, of course, horror exploitation. And I always go back to the slasher being my top genre. I just love it. I love the whole scenario of a group of unsuspected, victims being, kind of picked off one by one. There being, a lot of mystery and maybe some intrigue around what's happening. Usually, a lot of these films are set in a very isolated place, like in a cabin or in the woods somewhere, or at a camp, or a spooky house. There's always the masked killer, which I'm a huge fan. If you give me a slasher killer with a really cool mask, even if the movie is not very good, I'm in it. I'm in it to win it. That's an instant thumbs up for me. And of course, the atmosphere that a film creates. My favorite slasher movie, which I've talked about many times and I've done multiple shows on, is Bill Luswig's Maniac. That's the greatest, for me, the greatest slasher movie ever made. And Curtains is a film that I did not see until about probably a year ago. I never heard of it. And again, I'm a huge fan of all of these, amazing films that came out of Canada in the late 70s and 80s. And Curtains came out in 1983. It was directed by Richard Klupka and Peter R. Simpson. And again, this is one of those films I never heard about. I never really in any of my travels. It was a movie I just missed. The thing that happens too is like like anything. There's a lot of films that you see. You're pretty late to the game, and you kind of like kick yourself to like, wow, how the hell did I miss this? But that just happens because there's so much. There's so much to explore, and you can kind of get inundated or a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of content that's out there, new and old, and especially old, especially now with all the boutique labels putting out, so many underground films. But I just love, my favorite thing is just that going through this period of discovery or being in that kind of mindset. So this is one of those examples. After I saw Curtains, I'm like, how the hell did I miss this movie? Amazing cast, really great writing. Samantha Edgar, John Vernon, who is a pretty popular character actor who I've seen in a plethora of different films over the years. He's pretty famous. He was in a lot of films in the 70s and 80s. Linda Thorson, Layla Donaldson, and Lynn Griffin, who is Lynn Griffin's awesome. She was actually on my show She, of course, was one of the stars of Black Christmas, which, how did I forget to mention Black Christmas? Black Christmas being definitely is a Canadian slasher film and probably the most influential, probably the most important slasher movie ever made. And I got to have Lynn Griffin on the show last year as a guest, and that was pretty amazing. Um, the thing, and the funny thing is, the way I first saw Curtains was Opera House Video, which is the locally run, locally owned video shop here in Belfast, and actually the only locally owned and running video shop, I believe, at this point in the entire state of Maine, which is wild. Dennis Howard, the owner, I've been friends with him for so long, and so they started about it's probably about 2 years ago. They started doing these street sales where they were selling off, a lot of movies that they just didn't have room to put on display. Tons of inventory. They buy movies all the time from people, and they're it's a huge store. They have a lot of space, but everything is pretty filled up, so they get inundated with a lot of movies. And I played a gig there a couple of weeks ago, and I went to the back room of Opera House Video, and I was just amazed by the amount of films that they had in the back. Like, you're just a wall of movies, boxes and boxes of all of these movies that they've gotten that they just don't have the space for. So what they started doing, what Dennis Howard started doing, is they started having these kind of street sales and selling all the movies at a really cheap price. All kinds of DVDs, and also a pretty decent amount of Blu-rays, and also VHS. And I think it was the last street sale that they had, which was probably, I think it was in June of this year. And I got one of the movies I bought, and it was a DVD copy, was Curtains, because I'm like, oh, this movie is made for me. It's a Canadian slasher movie from 1983, sold. And I never seen it before. I never heard of it, and I was totally blown away by this movie. And I was like, "Damn, how the hell did I miss this? This is just a killer, pun intended, slasher movie from top to bottom." And so then, and I still have that copy, obviously. And then a couple of weeks ago, I was at Bull Moose, a different one. I was at the Bull Moose, which I had never gone to before. The Bull Moose in Lewiston, Maine, right on the outskirts of Lewiston, and there's this huge, really awesome video shop there, or Bull Moose location, and they had Curtains on Blu-ray, this like special edition. I was just like, fuck yeah. And the DVD copy that I have for Curtains is good. It's pretty good quality, but the transfer of this film on Blu-ray is immaculate. It looks absolutely gorgeous and pristine. Super excited. There's a lot of cool. There's two really cool, which I haven't really watched yet. Two really awesome documentaries. An older documentary when the film was shot. When it came out in '83, there was a pretty extensive documentary made about the film process around it. And then I think there was a later that came out maybe a few years ago, another kind of documentary, like a retrospective documentary about the movie. And so I watched it the other night, and Synapse put this movie out. And Synapse is, I could be wrong, but I think Synapse was one of the first boutique labels that specialized in the world of exploitation movies and, low budget slasher movies. And so they've been around for many, many years. I think they were one of the first companies that, before Blu-rays came out, they were one of the first companies to start, bringing back a lot of these cult movies and selling them through on DVD and bringing back these kind of new prints. Um, and they were one of the trailblazers. They've been around for like 15 years maybe. Now there's like, there's so many boutique labels out there. It's kind of insane, and there's more coming out. And now we're in this crazy like renaissance around exploitation. It's just wild. So, but this movie is incredible. It's such a well done. It's like a highbrow slasher horror exploitation movie. It's really really well done. It's got so much great atmosphere, great kills. The masked killer in this movie is just super awesome. The premise of the story is really great. It's kind of about this. It's interesting. It's kind of almost like a movie within a movie, and it's basically about this guy who is this scumbag director, and he's directing this film, and he has this actress that he is going to be working with, and he convinces her to the role he's playing is of this woman who is basically kind of losing her mind. So what she tries to do to kind of get into character, like in a method actor kind of way, is to basically go into this asylum to live and to try to like emulate that environment for her role. And while she's doing this and kind of being caught up in this world, she kind of gets double crossed by the director, and she ends up getting fired. And he's like, this director's approaching all of these actresses to take on this role, and he's kind of this backstabbing, conniving kind of dirtbag. And so the movie's about, and she essentially loses the role, and ends up, kind of in real life terms, starts kind of going crazy. So the film is like kind of a revenge movie on this director, but it's super awesome, and I love because you don't know, the ending is just fantastic for this movie. You don't know who the killer is until the very end. Great kills, like I said. There's a lot of suspense. There's a lot of mystery in this movie. It's kind of slow, which I really love. The atmosphere is just great. It's such an awesome movie. It's definitely, again, like I said in the beginning of the show. After watching it the other night, I was like, and it was only my second time, I was like, instantly, this movie is now in my top list. Definitely, it's in my top 20 list of one of the greatest slasher movies ever made. The other movie that really, really got to the top for me is a movie called The Burning, which is an amazing 80s slasher movie. The first movie that Tom Savini, the effects genius, it was his first movie. And again, I had never seen that movie. I had heard about that movie quite a bit, and that movie had been coming up in a lot of different shows that I had been watching. But this was cold. Like, I didn't know anything about it. Really, really great. Really awesome slasher movie. Really creepy, really atmospheric. Can't recommend this movie enough. And again, the biggest part is the transfer of this movie, because I do have it on DVD, and it's like, it's literally the case, like I've said many times, it's literally, getting a film that gets this kind of treatment, on a really high-end Blu-ray. It's like watching the film for the very, very first time, and super awesome movie, one of the best slasher movies. Canada was such an amazing place back then. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.